What is up, my jewelers? Tosh here. We are getting closer and closer to CrystalVale. Our heroes have come back from the perilous journey. We're getting more sneak peeks about what CrystalVale is going to look like and the DFK chain that it's hosted on, which is super exciting. Definitely check my video out if you haven't seen that yet. But one of the most important features about CrystalVale is going to be these ice gardens. And we know with liquidity farming in general, the faster that we can get into these pools, the more that we're going to be able to take out of them. So today I'm going to go over how the ice gardens are going to work, how they are a little bit different from the Joule gardens, and then we're going to talk a little bit about strategy. So you're not going to want to miss this one. I'm just a wizard, not a financial advisor. But if you go ahead and smash that like button and subscribe to the channel, maybe good fortune will come your way. So before we talk about the ice gardens, let's go ahead and first talk about how the Joule gardens work, because the model is extremely similar. So in the Joule gardens, the purpose of this is to mint all of the new Joule that will ever come into existence. So right now, at the earlier periods, we have a very significant amount of Joule that are being minted, and then as time goes on, that's going to be dwindled down. So what this is talking about is that it will show you the Joule per block, and then it also calculates a Joule per minute. So on Harmony, each block is supposed to last at 2 seconds long. There have been some delays in the network which caused this to be delayed. So for example, in our first epoch, the Harmony network was actually running around 4 seconds or so. So this was distribution here was actually took place for an even longer period of time, but since the Joule is being emitted by block, that means that no more Joule was actually being minted. We weren't minting more rewards than what was planned in this initial phase. So this number here is how much is minted for the entirety of the gardens per either that block or for that minute, but we know that's not always really a minute. Right now, where we're at is in this 20 to 35 epoch range, where we kind of stabilize at our 8 Joule per block. And if we can go to the gardens, we can see how much of this Joule is allocated to each of the gardens. So for example, in the Joule to 1 pool, half of the rewards are allocated towards that. So that's 4 of the 8 Joule are being emitted and distributed along the Joule 1 pool owners. So what that does is that it creates a lot of people putting their money into there to kind of get these APRs to be more of an average. So for example, let's say you were the very first person to put any liquidity tokens into the Joule 1 pool rewards on Epoch 1. That means every 2 seconds or every block that you would receive half of that amount, 128 Joule, and 95% of that would be locked unless you don't hit that claim button yet. Let's say another person comes in and they put in an equal amount of your liquidity tokens. Now you guys would split those rewards, so each of you would get half of those 56 tokens apiece per block. Now let's go ahead and look at the issuance schedule for the ice gardens. So a couple different things here is that instead of the periods being based off of how quickly the network is running, the ice gardens are actually going to have very fixed periods. So these epochs are going to be exactly 1 week long. They did still keep the same format where we're going to have a 2-second block period. So those numbers are comparable in this same way. Now we know the crystal supply is also 1/4 of what Joule supply is going to be, or max supply. So keep that in mind, that crystal is going to be more scarce because there's going to be less of it. And what we can see here is that there's significantly less crystal that's being emitted throughout our gardens to help balance that. Now here's the biggest difference, I think, between the Joule Gardens and the Ice Gardens. So the Ice Gardens will open with a Joule-based stake for crystal emissions. As the Ice Gardens are built out over the following weeks, new incentivized pairs will be added and allocations will be adjusted to reward a wider variety of liquidity providers. So what this means is that the entirety of the crystal emissions to start off with are going to be for a single staking Joule mechanism. That means all you need to do is own Joule and have it ready to stake, and that's going to get you those best crystal earnings right away. And it's very interesting that at the start, they're not actually going to be providing any liquidity pairs. These are going to be added later on, so you don't necessarily need to hold on to any other tokens such as AVAX or a bridged Harmony over to the DFK chain. That's not going to be necessary at first until those other allocations open up, those other gardens. Let's do some quick math to give some predictions about what kind of APRs we might be looking at for this single staking Joule pool. So in Epoch 1 for Joule, we got 256 Joule per block. And in Crystal, that is 32 per block. So this is 1/8 of the total amount that of Crystal that will be emitted compared to how much Joule was emitted in Epoch 1. When we were at the end of Epoch 1 in CrystalVale, the APRs capped out at around 24,000% APR as a rough number. Now, if we take that 24,000 divided by 8, that's going to get us to about 3,000% APR. So I think this is a decent prediction about where to estimate the APRs are going to be at for the Crystal Gardens. But these numbers could get diluted even further because we know that there's going to be so many people hopping into that single staking Joule immediately in CrystalVale. So we'll see what kind of effects the dilution will have. I just want to add that this is an informed guess or prediction. There's a good chance that I am off here, but given the data, this is my current prediction. The locking mechanisms are going to be the same as they were in the Joule Gardens. So in Epoch 1, we're going to have that 5% of the tokens being able to be unlocked right away. Everything else will go into a lock balance, which you will eventually be able to use your miners at. Note that questing in CrystalVale is not going to be active immediately, so don't expect to have to send your miners over to knock away at your locked crystal right away. I believe this is going to be several months before we get that feature down, but maybe even faster. Who knows? So as far as strategy, what I've seen was really successful in CrystalVale, especially for bigger wallets, is if you hold on to your claim and don't claim until one of these way later epochs. So what that does is that it doesn't throw your crystal into the locked balance. It's just kind of sitting in limbo for a little while, and then you can claim the higher percentage, which we're earning significantly more rewards. If we see the reward schedule, it does get slashed a little bit slower than the Joule Gardens. So, for example, the Joule Gardens from Epoch 1 to Epoch 2, it was slashed in half, where in Epoch 1 to Epoch 2, what we see is just a 25% decrease. So we see this a little bit more gradually decreasing over time in general, not too different once we kind of get progress through some of the later epochs here. But personally, I think I'm going to be holding on until maybe Epoch 10 or so before I even consider hitting that claim button. But that's just my personal strategy. What do you think you're going to do? Alright, last thing I want to talk about in this video is a little bit about locked Joule transfers and if this is going to be a thing for locked crystal. So when we found out about the locked Joule transfers, we saw a huge decrease in the price for our precious Joule. This effectively what it did was that a lot of people that were bullish on Joule were now selling their Joule so they could buy the lock Joule because it was so severely discounted. This did kind of happen at the peak of Joule's price. So obviously there are some other explanations for Joule's price going down other than this transfer, but I do believe that this did play a very significant part. So if you're watching this video, I did put up a Twitter poll recently about whether Crystal should be transferable or not. Go ahead and answer that, and just so we can get some initial data to show the devs. We might get a totally different situation with that being known from the start, though. So if we know right from the start that we can transfer those locked crystal balances, then that might get priced in more immediately than be a big shock to the market. So definitely two sides to the story there, but let me throw your thoughts either in the comments here or on my tweet. Would love to hear your thoughts from the community. Also, if you're not familiar, this site here, dfk.market, is actually a marketplace where you can buy and sell the locked Joule. Even though I am kind of against it, I don't think it's very healthy for the economy. I do think that more people should be aware that this actually is an option and that you can buy some Joule at pretty steep discounts. Note that the smaller the bag, usually the more the premium that's going to go for. So we see like the bag with only 1,300 Joule is about 40 cents more expensive than the bag with 20,000 Joule. So that's kind of how this market works. Feel free to check it out if you're looking to play that. Alrighty, well that's going to wrap up this video. I want to leave you guys with a couple thought-provoking questions. So first of all, how long do y'all think we're only going to have the single staking Joule for crystal emissions? My guess is that by Epoch 2, we'll see some new gardens. Second of all, what do you think are going to be the first pairings in the ice gardens? I think the obvious ones are we're going to see a Joule crystal pair first and a Joule AVAX pair next, but I'm really curious if we're going to see other GameFi tokens from AVAX on there, or what other tokens are going to be on there early on. So definitely post your thoughts in the comments on that below. And then lastly, do you think the locked crystal should be transferable? I want to hear some comments on that. And if either way, I'd also would love to know if you think this is something that should be voted on with a governance vote for Joule holders and for hero holders as well. So put your thoughts on all those questions below. I'd love to hear that. And stay tuned for more events and get excited for this CrystalVale launch. It's going to be huge. All right, Tosh out. Latest.